And welcome, everybody, to the latest Showrunner Huddle. This is actually our 9th Q&A since the course started, which is crazy. I can't believe we've done that many of them, but it's awesome. But this is the first that we are doing on Blab. Everybody's been talking about Periscope and Blab, and obviously we can't do one of these on Periscope because Periscope is just for one person, but we can do it on Blab. And so we kind of figured we would do this as a little demonstration so you can see how the platform works, kind of introduce it to you. If there's questions at the end and you have questions about the actual platform, we can talk about that because I've done a few tests with it. And so we'll see. And if we like this, maybe we'll do future Q&As on Blab. Maybe we'll go back to Hangouts. I don't know, but we'll be interested to get your feedback when it is over. I'm your host, Jared Morris. I'm joined by Johnny Naster. Johnny, why don't you show all the late arrivers your shirt?
Check this
out.
That
is the official T-shirt of the Showrunner. It looks great, man.
It does. Thank you. I thank you again for it.
You're welcome. And I thank you just for being you.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm doing great, man.
Yep.
Friday, 5:03 p.m. How do you get one? That's a good question.
That is a good question. We're gonna have to ask Jessica. Maybe we'll get some of these.
I believe there was one made, and I got it. I'm not sure how or why, but it was given to me. So yeah.
Yeah, we brought those to Podcast Movement. Jessica had them made. I think I got one. You got one. That might be it. That literally might be it.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I don't know, maybe we can get some additional ones.
Yeah. But otherwise, I'm doing great. I am doing great. It's been a good week.
Harry said Blab needs a click to buy button. Yes, that'd be nice. That would be nice. So we are doing a Q&A. Many of you have submitted questions. I think we've got 6 questions or so. They're all really, really good questions. Now, one new feature of Blab, just to let you all know, let me get my finger on it right here. There's a little thing called props on Periscope. Look at that. Look at the upvotes. See, I'm just going to keep my finger here and just see how long they go.
What about this one?
Apparently, this is the secret.
This one too.
Okay. So anyway, there's props. These are there are hearts on Periscope.
Can I click my own?
I don't know if you can click your own.
Oh, I can't.
So we can use these for fun. You can prop up points that we make, and it's kind of. I will say though, if you're going to do Periscope or Blab, one thing I really found out when we did our assembly call Blab is these things are kind of silly. And when I first saw them, I thought they were kind of cheesy, like hearts and props and all this stuff. But it really does get the audience into it. Like I've really come to like it. And so I think it's kind of a way to make these conversations even more fun, exciting, and interesting. So with that said, you apparently have a 22 prop lead right now. I'm going to attribute that to your shirt. Yes. But we will now see. We'll see now as we go through the questions.
Should I do this? There we go.
There we go. That'll work. Okay, so let's get to some questions. Let's do some questions. That's why folks are here. So let's start with a question that I know a lot of people have. Mark Crossling says, we've discussed new and noteworthy both in the course and a huddle. What, how, and who determines what's hot? He says he's included who after Johnny's insightful comment about new and noteworthy, and in particular the self-publishing podcast. Mark says his podcast is currently doing extremely well for 2 categories in what's hot. Yes, it is. That podcast, I see that podcast all over the place on iTunes. And Mark says, does What's Hot have a time period attached to it? By way of example, if Hack the Entrepreneur had an unexpected but sustainable increase in subscribers and downloads, would it appear in What's Hot? Mr. Naster, what is your response to this?
It has nothing to do with timing. And I'm only looking over this way because I have another monitor here. And I'm actually opening up iTunes right now just to go to my category and just to see if me or somebody I know is in What's Hot. So What's Hot, yeah, there. So I'm in What's Hot right now, in marketing. So it really is, it's exactly how you said it, Mark, when you said if Hack the Entrepreneur, my show, had an increase in subscribers and downloads, except where you said sustainable, it doesn't have to be sustainable. What's Hot literally is sort of flashes of movement within the algorithm. At least this is how I see it. Because on my days that I publish, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, I'll bump up to those. And it will. So it's not based on ratings and reviews at that point. New and noteworthy and stuff is really based on subscribers plus your reviews. And reviews and ratings also helps your overall ranking. But what's hot to me is strictly publishing. So if you're publishing that day, plus you have subscribers, then you will move up to that what's hot. And then obviously it's the whole self-perpetuating thing that then you'll go from what's hot, people will see you there, and that'll also move you up the rankings, and then the rankings help you, and it helps you move up. So you'll see a lot of correlation between, say, the top 50 podcasts in a category and what's hot, the movement around what's hot. And what's hot, like when you're in your iTunes on your desktop computer, what's hot, just like any of the other categories, in the top right of that, it's hard, I wish I could show you my screen, but I guess I could, that'd be really weird though. But there is a see all button in the top corner of it, actually, and there's a whole, I think there's 100 or 200 podcasts within. It actually goes way more than that. It's almost like, it's like hundreds and hundreds of shows, and you'll see them. It gets updated, I would say, about every hour, maybe every 2 hours. Sometimes weekends it slows right down in changes, but you'll see fluctuations, and you'll see shows move all around. And honestly, there is, again, the potential for Apple to manually put things where they want them, but then it's algorithmically based after that. Like as a precedent, it's algorithms, but they can pick and choose where things go. That's just how it works. But there's no timing. That's really for the people that are out of new and noteworthy. It kind of, that's their ranking systems.
And I found this when I was doing a search. Now, this is from 2012, but it's actually an answer by Rob Walsh, who I think he's one of the head guys at Libsyn, I believe. But there was a question in the Apple support community: how does iTunes decide what is hot in the top podcasts? And Rob's response was that the top 100 and 200 lists that you see in iTunes are not based on the number of subscriptions all time, but rather on the number of new subscriptions in iTunes for a show for the past week, with a weighted average giving more weight to the last 24 and 48 hours. They do that as a way to keep it changing, because otherwise, obviously, if it was based more on just subscriptions, then the top 200 would have all the same shows in it. And then he echoed what you said, especially with new and noteworthy. There's a lot of Apple employees picking shows and placing them where they want them to be.
Yeah.
Yes.
And just to answer Chris, I believe, right? Yeah, Chris Handy, Blue Jays fan. I guess so. I'm not really a baseball fan, but you're right. They're the only Canadian team, and they're just down the street from me. So, yeah, that's to answer your question.
Yeah, and he's also right. The Rangers will be eliminating them, which is big news here in Texas.
Is it? Okay. Yeah, I don't follow it really, except, I mean, it's really like, it's hard for me to avoid right now, but I'm trying my best.
This is really quick. The Rangers literally were like the worst team in baseball in like mid-May, and now they're in the playoffs. It's literally been one of like the biggest turnarounds in the history of baseball. So
weren't the Blue Jays also? I thought the Blue Jays always were.
They have been. Well, they had like one of the longest playoff droughts ever that they just overcame. So,
right.
Yeah. So a quick baseball interlude there.
Oh, and a quick to the subscribers, FMS reliability. How do you know how many subscribers a show has? We don't really, except for, it's kind of, the only way I can go off of is like a trend line sort of in my downloads. So on a publishing day, now consistently I can see like around 5,000 people download it. I know how many subscribers, although that it trails off, because then on non-publishing days there's still downloads, but you got to kind of just feel it out. I mean, if you're getting 100 downloads a day, you probably don't have 500 subscribers, kind of thing. So, but unfortunately, there's absolutely no way to tell. There's also no way to tell who's listening, only who's downloading.
Yeah. All right, let's move along here. We have a question. Now, there's been a lot of talk about community, and so this is one of the reasons why I wanted to put this question in here, because Nance asks about community. So let me read this. So Nance says, I ask you and Jared this question with a little context. I heard Jared say how Facebook is just not a good idea for a community building platform. How to do this? So what Nance wants to do, the show is for early career, overwhelmed, dissatisfied, nearing burnout women physicians. Interviewing seasoned women physicians to ask them how they rode the roller coaster of medicine, family, and living. Wants listening physicians to have a place where they can go to ask their own questions, to weigh in with their ideas so they feel less alone. Also wants a way for them to get closer. Nance is a leadership coach and trainer, so that Nance can support them online, ask them questions. Being able to contact them directly is valuable to Nance. So there's a particular challenge Nance has, and we can use this to talk more generally about communities. Nance thinks that the audience would use an online group if it offers either anonymity or confidentiality. So, for instance, if a doctor asks about X and someone from their work finds out, that could have negative implications for them as professionals. So really wanting some privacy there. What online platforms are possible? Any approaches you'd recommend? I have to plan this in a way that moderating is minimal work. So let me start this out by saying, certainly, if you need privacy and you need confidentiality, Facebook is not the way to go. I mean, obviously, that should be obvious. Obviously, you can have a closed group and a private group, but it's still on Facebook. You are building something on someone else's land. And it's just a discussion. It's just a community that you're building, and there are certain times to do that. I know we've had this. Should you be on Facebook? Should you not? And there are times for it. Yes, this is not one of them. And so I think, Nance, really what you're going to want to do is go with some kind of private forum. And this is something that you could do in Rainmaker, because what you would do is put this behind a membership wall and make sure that people need a password to log in, and you can be very particular about who can get in, who can log in, and who can't. But depending if it's medical, this could be a whole other layer to where you may even need to go with an extra layer of security beyond just passwords. And I don't have experience there with an extra super secret double lockdown forum to be able to give great insight there. But I think at a minimum, for what you want, if the doctors that are going to be listening to you want privacy, this is something that you have to take off of Facebook, put on your own site, and definitely put it behind a membership wall. And I would say even a paid membership wall more than just a free one. Do you have any additional insight to add to this one?
Facebook, of course, not like you said. The private communities, well, they're closed communities for us, but I mean, Facebook analyzes everything that's said in there and documents everything that's said, advertises to you based on what you've said, which is then weird going around if you've been talking about personal things, then you go around the web, and it's so you definitely need to have forum software that's password protected and probably paid, as Jared said. So I think you totally covered it, Jared. And also in taking the extra step of saying that with the medical and the privacy issues, there could be a legal aspect to it that obviously we don't know. But social media is not the place for this. You definitely need some sort of a forum area, which if it's on a Rainmaker site, it's built in. And then if it's on a WordPress site, there's lots of plugins you can get for that service as well that make it so you have to be a member to take part.
What are your general thoughts on this question of community now? I mean, you have a couple of Facebook communities that you're in, the Showrunner podcasting course. You have an HTE community. What are your thoughts on using Facebook for community as opposed to hosting a private forum generally?
Generally, Facebook is. And although I'm not even that good at that sometimes, because it does get overwhelming, forums to me, but I really haven't been part of a forum for 10 years that's been of any value. And that's not to say that tons of them don't exist if they have good moderators and they're in there doing it, obviously, right? Exactly. That's absolutely key. But without that, and it's hard to get the momentum going if you don't have a bunch of people all of a sudden. If you have 5 people in there, it's really kind of hollow and empty, and it's hard to get that momentum going. Once you can get that going, with the authority ones, I've been in there, but I haven't actually participated, but it's like, wow, there's a lot of people and a lot of brilliant conversations going on. So that's awesome. But I still don't feel like I could garner that sort of a community myself. So I guess that's why Facebook to me is it's where people are. We're going to be creating 2 new groups for my book and for the book launch and stuff, and they're all going on Facebook, straight onto Facebook, just so we can kind of get momentum going and getting people helping us with things. And it's just, to me, you can put a message there in a private group and it pops up on their Facebook. So when they do log in today, which most people log in 10 times today anyways, it's there. It's hard to get it through my head for a small community to get people to oh yeah, I have to go back to that forum and see. I know you can do email and stuff like that, but it's hard. And then Slack I've been working with, and I've been trying. My mastermind group uses the Slack chat now, and it's pretty good. And I've joined a couple of other ones that I've been recommended to, and they're like private Slack groups, but it hasn't taken off to me. It's just a whole bunch of noise, which Facebook is a ton of. And so it's the kind of thing where, to me, it's like you got to take the lesser of two evils, see what you can do. I think if you can pull off a forum, you should definitely pull off a forum.
You said something interesting there that made me think, because look, I've really enjoyed the Facebook community with the Showrunner. I really, really have. The problem with it has been, now that we've been doing it for, I don't know, what, 5-6 months? How long ago we launched? Whatever it's been, 5 or 6 months. Yeah. You're started, like, we have a good amount of activity. Like, that is a good group. It's active. You post in there, you're going to get at least 3-4 responses. There's great discussions. The problem is the discussion that we're having tomorrow was the same one that we had 3 weeks ago in some cases, and the same one that we then had a month ago. And the problem with once a group gets very active is not just so many different notifications to the point where you become blind to them. So you kind of, I think, in some ways lose that benefit of Facebook where people are going to be notified, because I think they end up just, starting to overlook it, especially from a moderator perspective. But more than that, the archiving of subjects is really, really difficult, and the organization. And the search is fine, but for something like the Showrunner, where new people are going to have XYZ questions, and that there's kind of a cycle of questions, there's similar topics that you would like to get all people's perspectives on, having an organized forum where people can go in to discuss that specific topic rather than searching through conversations and trying to choose which of the 6 to participate in is going to be a lot better. But what I'm thinking is, and so that's, I don't know if we're ever going to switch the Showrunner over to that. We haven't even discussed it. We've just kind of had some, discussions like this and sharing our thoughts. But I wonder if it's not a good idea for folks, especially if they don't know, like Chris asked, does he have a, kind of a minimum viable audience for a community? What about starting a community in Facebook? Because you are going to get more activity there earlier. And if it grows to the point where the Showrunners is, and you have that problem, consider it a good problem to have, and then possibly take it over to a forum. And you'll have an idea of what gets talked about. You'll have a better idea of how to structure your categories and your topics. Because that's another, I think, part of what makes a forum go is if the suggested topics are good, the organization is good, and then you got to have people who can help you moderate. And that's the other thing with the Showrunner now, is we have several people that we could ask who are reliable, who we trust, to help us be moderators for this forum. And we'd already know these people. So I'm starting to think that maybe a hybrid strategy of starting on Facebook, and then if you reach kind of a critical mass with your forum, move it over to a forum that is much more organized. I'm starting to think that might be a decent way to go, especially for people who may be on the fence about where to start. Start with Facebook, because if you can't get activity on Facebook, you're probably not going to get it in your forum. But if you do, then you can launch your forum and have an even better idea of how to structure it.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good point. And 2 people, Paul Jarvis, I saw recently, has done this. He started a free group and put it on Facebook because it was the easiest. I think it was on Facebook, or else it was just straight to Slack. And then from that group, he then went down to a paid monthly program and got a smaller amount of those people, though, and then moved them into a private community somewhere else. And Dan Norris just did it with his book. And I think that's a good way. It's like most things, right, in this whole game, is that it's not an end-all, be-all. So it's not like if you choose Facebook now that you can't go to a private forum later. By all means, that's probably because the barrier to entry for you and for your audience is the lowest. That's why so many people are using it, because you could literally have a closed group up. After this call, you could be 10 minutes, you could all have one up and start just sending one person there, 2 people there. Unfortunately, it takes you almost as much work with one person in the group with you as with 100, because they still need daily contact. They still need to respond to their questions, which is great, but you have to be willing to put in that time, and you will build a group over time. But then when you get a big enough group, and if you think it's getting too big, that's an amazing problem to have, then decide and talk to those people and see how you can move a bunch of them to somewhere else, probably your own private forum.
Mm-hmm. Chris asked, do you manage both groups? I would think if you're going to do that, there would certainly be a transition period. I don't think you would just shut down the Facebook community today and start over in the forum tomorrow. You would probably have to kind of condition people that, hey, now the forum is where to talk about this, and maybe be in there to kind of link people in the discussions. And that might be a month, 2-month process until you transition all the way over. Just set the expectations. And I think if you are, I would think, to do it right, you'd want to identify who are the 5 or 6 most active people in this community. Contact them, get buy-in from them, really, sell them on the idea of why it's better to go over here. And a lot of times, these communities are they are going to be led by you, of course, as the person, but people also take their signals from the most active people in the group. And so if they start moving over here and discussing over here, I think you'll start to see other people. And just make sure that, that there's a notification system on the forum so people can opt into discussions and really educate people on how to use it. And then I think you can transition over if that's what you want to do. So, but again, this is one of those, we could probably spend an hour talking about it. So if you have follow-up questions, let us know. We may end up talking about this on an episode too. Let's see if this works again. No. All right, there we go.
Okay. They want to let you down,
The people listening to the MP3 are going to be wondering why there was just a gap in the sound there. It's because I was pandering for props. That's why. Okay, so Chuck Miller.
Pandering for props. Is that the title? That's the title.
That could be the name of a new show. Pandering for props. Okay, Chuck Miller. Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Google Hangouts, Instagram. Oh, look, a squirrel. Lately, I've been watching many of my virtual mentors, such as Pat Flynn, Michael Hyatt, and Darren Rouse, all getting excited about Periscope. And now Blab. Elliot Hulse is now on Facebook Live. I was planning to post a question for a Showrunner Huddle episode to the effect of, is chasing shiny objects a distraction from actually producing quality content? What is the risk? Then coincidentally, you announced this huddle would be on Blab, so I guess I get to witness the platform in action. He's assuming that the answer will be something to the effect of, depends where your audience is. His personal concern is that this is just more stuff that potentially will add to the learning curve, procrastination in areas where I may not even need to be. He'd be interested in our thoughts on the matter. Okay, so I won't disappoint you or shock you by saying that, yes, part of it is that it depends on where your audience is. But frankly, if you're using Periscope, if you're using Blab, you're going to end up drawing a lot of people from Twitter. And my guess is, you're going to have some portion of your audience on Twitter. So I don't think that where your audience is the number one deciding factor here with Periscope, Blab, whatever the shiny new toy is that you want to use. I think it's, can you identify a significant objective that you can achieve with this platform? Or can you identify a hypothesis that you want to test with it? Because you may not know for sure. You may want to test something. But I think the problem people get into, and I know this because it happens myself, is you see Periscope and you just run to do Periscope without really thinking about it, without watching Chris Ducker and Lewis Howes and the other guys Chuck mentioned to see what they're doing well. And then really sit back and think, okay, here's where I am. Here's what my goals are. Here's what I know my audience needs. How can I use Periscope to fulfill this somehow? Instead of just, I want to use Periscope. So I think really thinking about it strategically and how this medium in particular can help you. So, for example, with Blab, right? We're not sure yet if we're going to ever use Blab again for the Showrunner. We don't know. We're doing this as a test, right? I can tell you pretty much for certain that with the assembly call, we are going to use Blab. And it took us, I didn't initially jump on Blab for that, but we did a test with it. And the reason why is because it allows us better interaction with our audience. It's a sports show, the whole voting thing, people really get into that. We like how there's a chat right here, because in the Google Hangout box that we used before, it was very hard for us to also look at the chat over in YouTube. From a post-production standpoint, it actually makes it simpler. And so there's a lot of different reasons that for us, using Blab gives our audience a better experience and it makes our production more efficient. And that was the hypothesis before we tested it. After testing it, I confirmed that. So now we'll use it, as opposed to just, Blab looks cool, let's do it. Basically what Chuck said with, oh, look, a squirrel. So I think you really got to be careful with that. And when you think that, you get excited, channel the excitement, but step back and really dig into the platform a little bit more. And I think have a real specific reason for why you're going to use it and how it serves both you and your audience. What would you say about Blab, Periscope, all these new things that pop up all the time?
Well, I think that's a whole different question. But the main first thing that Chuck says is, lately I've been watching many of my virtual mentors, Pat Flynn, Michael Hyatt, Darren Rouse. So I think you have to determine, are you trying to go deep with your audience, or are you trying to go wide and find more audience? Those people there are, one of them has a massive podcast. Well, three of them do now, but one of them started as a massive podcaster, and two of them are either like best-selling authors or a massive blogger, like one of the first original bloggers in the world, and has a massive business. These people aren't necessarily trying to find audience. They're trying to get depth with their audience right now and go deep in where they are. And really, they have the time and they have the resources around them to really now go deep on that relationship and really further it. If you have an audience and you want to take them further and go deep with them, then by all means, I think that's your place to probably start doing it if you're building your audience somewhere else already. But I don't know if, I bet you if Pat Flynn, Michael Hyatt, and Darren Rouse didn't have massive audiences and businesses right now, I bet you they wouldn't be going to Periscope and spending all day on Periscope. That's just not what they would be doing. I think I'm going to be starting to use some Periscope to go deeper with my audience because I'm building a good audience from my podcast. But now they want to, because it's all my guests, it's all for my audience. But now they want to know more about me and they want to learn directly from me about that. And I think that that's going to be a good platform. I just actually downloaded a couple days ago on my phone. I haven't actually done it this week because I've been working on other stuff, but I need to get into it. But I don't know if that's a place where anybody would start building their audience, because it's just one thing. We don't know if it's going to be here next week. We don't know if it's going to be here the week after. Talk about building your like on somebody else's land, right? That whole sharecropping thing. It's the thing disappears in 24 hours. You're not actually creating content. I mean, there's all catch now and you can catch it and keep it there. But I mean, really, if you were trying to create valuable video content, I would be doing it on YouTube because there's a tried and true. YouTube is not going anywhere and you can build massive millions of people, audiences and subscribers there, and you can monetize that. That's like a podcast to me. That's an actual legitimate audience. So to me, it's figure it out. Are you trying to go deep or are you trying to go wide? If you're trying to go wide, find other places, I think, that are more yours and are just places where you can actually kind of find more people. I don't think enough people, I mean, podcasting just last year or this year was the year that finally everybody figured out podcast. Like not everybody as in podcasters. I mean, the world, right? Now it's not shocking for people to hear about podcasting, but I mean, seriously, talk to anybody outside of our tiny little world of tech geeks. They don't know what Periscope is. So unless you're trying to find those tech geeks, then by all means. But I really think that if you can bring audience from somewhere else and bring them into your world via Periscope, by all means. Blab for this, though, like we used it for this because this is us trying to go deep with our audience and maybe have some other people come in. That's awesome. We're not using this to build. We're not using this as like a sales platform for the showrunner. We're just seriously using it as we think it's a better tool where we can interact with you way better. This is amazing than we could with Google Hangouts. So why wouldn't we do that, right? But we're not doing it for any other purpose. We're strictly doing it to go deep with our audience that we've already found via our podcast or our blogs.
Great point. I love that distinction. And then to Chuck's other question about the procrastination aspect of it, you definitely can fall into a trap with the shiny new object that's always coming and getting distracted and trying to go over here when you got to focus on your core. And you made a great point there about, podcasts. I mean, if you've just started a podcast, focus on making your podcast great and connecting with people on your show. And, these other channels like this, worry about them when you have that audience to go deeper with, as opposed to, you've created 7 episodes of your show. Now you're over here for a week researching Periscope and doing all this. And I know this. I mean, I fight with myself about this all the time, keeping my eye on the ball. And it's so important because you can get very distracted with all the different shiny stuff, but that doesn't allow you to go really deep in one direction, which is what you've got to do to develop that audience relationship in the first place. Good discussion. Great question, Chuck. Thank you for submitting that. Okay, so Roman Castro. Love this question. So Roman says, yes, I'm all for making a difference and having an impact on people's lives, but at what point do we start looking for sponsors or other ways to make money from our podcasts? What do you think about this? What's your initial gut reaction to this question?
All about making a difference and having an impact on people's lives, but at what point do we start looking for sponsors? I want to not rant, but I don't actually even know which way I should rant. You have to monetize at some point, but if you're all for making a difference, then Roman, I don't know. I don't know what your situation is, so I don't know if the monetization is necessary to continue making a difference, or if you need to prove it to yourself or to someone else that this is a valuable use of your time podcasting, because all those things are things that I don't know, and I don't know I can't make a call on that without knowing those nuances, right? So my thing was always focus on your audience. Don't tell me you're focusing on your audience. Worry about focusing on your audience, right? Don't tell me that you want to make the biggest difference in the world. Just make the big difference in the world, and it will happen. And your audience will grow. Your audience will kind of come up. I mean, without an audience, you can't even, there's nothing to sponsor. So you kind of have to, like, you can't, it's so wrong to try and put the cart before the horse, because I mean, if you have 200 subscribers, somebody probably, unless you're in a tiny, super honed niche, they probably don't want to sponsor you anyway. So you're just thinking about the wrong things. You should really be focusing about your audience, one person at a time. Build that connection and keep them coming back. Keep finding out what they want more of, and keep finding out what it is you want, the transformation that you want to take place in their lives, and how you can take them there with your content. You have to be doing that. So unless there is something absolutely necessary right now why you have to monetize this, I wouldn't think about it. I didn't think about it with Hack the Entrepreneur. And I mean, this probably sounds completely asinine to anybody else. If you would have told me this a year ago, I would have probably said the same, but I literally was just focusing on my audience. And at like week 7, people just approached me and wanted to sponsor me because they knew, and I didn't look for anybody. I didn't think about it at all. I literally head down. I'm going to do everything. I'm going to get everybody to email me, tweet me as much as possible, which wasn't a whole lot, but I put all my heart and soul into every response I could give to people and all the content I was creating. And people found me and wanted to sponsor me. Not just my audience at that point, because they knew it was small, but it was going to grow because they saw that I was actually focused. I wasn't saying I was focused on my audience. I actually was focused on my audience, one person at a time. And you will build something. When you build something, trust me, you will monetize it. And those people aren't going to disappear really quickly. So you don't have to worry about grabbing them while they're there. Worry about keeping them now, because when you keep them, you will keep that platform for years. And that platform can be monetized for years after what you've created now and into the background. And you could go back if you want. Once you start getting big, you could possibly figure out a way to rebrand those old shows and just get sponsors on them, because there's audience now going through the back catalog, downloading it. But unfortunately, when we're starting, there isn't the audience going through it. So focus on the audience, focus on the audience. And just the sponsors will come. Trust me, they will come when you prove to them, by not saying it, but by actually doing it, and that you are focusing on building a community and building an audience, because that's who they want to pay. And that's who they want branding their stuff.
Well, this is a great question. Because I think there's almost two different answers here. Because Roman says, at what point do we start looking for sponsors? I mean, I wouldn't start looking for sponsors until you have an audience big enough to be attractive to a sponsor, right? I would not worry about that from the beginning. Focus on the audience. But the second part of Roman's question, or other ways to make money from our podcast, right? So at what point do you start looking for other ways to make money from the podcast? I do think that the focus has to be on the audience. And I mean, look at the shows that I do on the side. I mean, these are shows where it's been all audience and I've barely made any money from these. But I don't know that doing that 100% is necessarily the right thing or the necessary thing. I think you can start thinking about ways to make money from the beginning. I think a different point is, when do you start implementing it? And that is going to be very dependent. But I think and you may be wrong with some of your hypotheses in the beginning, but starting to think about it, I think, is smart, because you may even find some small ways to start, right? Like maybe it's So let me give you an example that'll illustrate this. Like on the Primality Primer episodes on Thursday, I'll do this Thank You Thursday, and I'll write these thank you notes from this gratitude box that someone gave me from Uncommon Goods, the website. So I reached out to Uncommon Goods. I said, hey, can I join your affiliate program? I'm talking about this all the time anyway. And there have already been people emailing about Primality, like, how can we support the show? Well, here's a way that you can support the show is if you want to get into this gratitude thing, writing one thank you note a week, go buy this box from Uncommon Goods. We'll get a cut of it. And so that's a way to start making money. And it's a small kind of quick thing to do, but it's something to start doing, right? And so I think you can start thinking about those things like, okay, my content, could this become a course? And that doesn't mean that you create a course right away, but you can start thinking about it and start even setting the stage and planting the seeds and doing all these things. Because I think if you don't, you wake up 4 years after you started a show and you've made only a couple $100 from it. And you're kind of at this critical point where it's like, hey, to keep doing this, we got to make money. And that's kind of my story with the assembly call. And again, there's a benefit to that because we focus so much on the audience and the audience built. But if we had maybe started thinking how we're thinking now 4 years ago, maybe 2 years in, when we had an audience big enough to monetize, we would have started already, as opposed to waiting for 2 more years like we are right now. So I think there's a difference between when you implement it and when you start thinking about it or looking for ideas. I would always be on the lookout for ideas and hypotheses of how you can do it, and then try and find, small little ways to dip your toe in the water and see how responsive the audience is and see what works. And to me, trying to balance those two things out, but keeping the primary, commitment to the audience, I think is a good way to go without leaving the other one solely behind until it's like, I've got 100,000 subscribers. Now I'll start thinking about it. Maybe that's when you implement it in a real significant way, but I would start thinking about it pretty soon.
Yeah. And so David followed it up with, it's also concerning for him because he hears very, very little from his audience. So he's like, even when I ask for feedback and what they want, it's crickets. Sponsorship isn't even on the radar until I make something, I'm actually producing something valuable. So that's hard, but at the same time, you just have to focus on your content. Like when I said I wanted people to reach out to me, I didn't want them to reach out to me to direct what I was creating with Hack the Entrepreneur, because I went through the whole audience of one. I knew what I was creating, and I refused to change that for like 6 months. Once I had my format down, I knew I was solid on who it was I was trying to attract. And those people were emailing me just random wacky business things or how to get started in business. So it's not, those are the people I was attracting. That was my audience of one, but they weren't asking me questions. And then I wasn't like looking for parts in the questions where, okay, now how can I change my content to fit that? I can then create stuff later for them, but it was just showing me that people were there, and then I was helping them in any way I could, just via however they responded. If they asked me a question on Twitter about branding or something, I would just respond to it right there. I wouldn't then do an episode on branding. So that's not what I was referring to in any way, David. Like, I'm not saying use it to shape what you're doing. I'm seriously saying that if you can get one person to email you a question about anything related to your market, like why you attracted them via your podcast, then respond to them wholeheartedly the way that they, through whatever format they got a hold of you. You can't necessarily determine how. And lots of people don't want to email. Like the percentage of what I get for listeners and what I get for emails is microscopic. But I have enough of them now that I get emails all the time, but that might not be it. And that you might have to go back further and think, like, is your audience on Periscope right now? And maybe you can go and then just like have a side thing once a week and see if you can go deep with the people, but don't do it as like you're trying to attract more people to your podcast, because then it's all confusing. But literally, if you can get 2 people from your podcast to come onto Periscope and go deep with them and build that relationship. Trust me, it seems like only 2 people, but that's 2 people. And those 2 people will eventually build into more. You just have to find wherever your audience happens to be. My audience dealt really well with email. That's just how they were. They're on their phones, like on the train or something, listening to me, and they could just email me or they would tweet me. I'm on Twitter and they're on Twitter a lot. So it worked, but I can't force people. I went to Facebook later, and it didn't really work for me because my audience is there, but they're also very, very overwhelmed with a whole bunch of other stuff, with family and with friends and now with marketing. So it's hard, but you kind of have to figure out where your audience is spending time, where you can take them into this depth, and then build. That's just for relationship building, right? That's why Pat Flynn and Darren Rouse are on those places. It's for that depth. So I just wanted to clarify that with you, David, because that's not what I was trying to do. I wasn't trying to change my format based on random feedback from my guests. I don't think that's right. I think you should have figured that out before you started at the Audience of One stage.
And I think it's very important the way that we think about monetization, because what I was going to say to Roman and to a lot of people who ask about sponsorships specifically is, sponsorships are hard and you have to have pretty good numbers, and it's the rare podcast that can get enough numbers to really make big money off of an advertiser. Yeah, well, and they're a pain in the ass, and
they really are. Like I've so many times just in the last couple of months, it might seem awesome, but it's a pain in the ass, and I've actually thought of cancel. I don't even make that much money off them at all.
Yeah, so. and I really think, because when I start talking with people and really asking them, I don't think they've dug deep enough yet on how to make money indirectly. And frankly, I know this because I'm working on that with some of my shows. I mean, I had a meeting with a couple of folks, a couple weeks ago, and they gave me great ideas on how with one of my shows in the future, how that thing can be monetized and what can be built around it, and just different ideas. And I realized, man, I haven't really gone deep enough on this yet. And I think there are so many ways to indirectly monetize a show, but because there are so many, and because sometimes they can be a little bit hard to figure out, we automatically think of sponsorships because they're the most obvious one and maybe the easiest to think about. But there's so many other ways that this can be done, whether it's a course or whether it's a book or whether it's XYZ, all these other ways. We don't have enough time to go into all of them. But I would really, and look, if, like Roman just said, he's got magazines and he's got apparel companies coming to him. Well, hey, now you got something. Now maybe, work on something with them and go in that direction. But I really think for most of us with our shows, we've got to be open-minded and really challenge ourselves to think, how can we monetize this indirectly? And if the direct ever comes because we just build this great audience, consider that a bonus rather than the target, is what I would say. At least that's how I think about my shows.
Johnny, do you have an ad sponsor manager or VA, or do you manage the relationship? I have a VA, but she doesn't deal with it. I use Midroll. Midroll.com does, so they're the ad company. The advertisers go through them and they take a huge cut, but they deal with the relationships completely. I literally just log in when I'm recording the episode for Monday, and it tells me who my 2 ad spots are, gives me the ad copy. I can tweak it, and then I have to upload that within a week, and then I have to upload stats for the next 2 weeks. And that's how it does it. But they take a lot of the money. So it's worth it when you have a massive show. I think when people have like 50,000, 100,000 downloads an episode kind of thing, then yeah, it gets really worth it, I've heard. But until then, it's good because it can pay for VAs, it can pay for editors and stuff, but it's a lot of work and a real pain and it's hard to just read random ad spots for like eyeglasses and stuff. It really is. It's something I've been struggling with. But it's just part of the show. It's part of creating a show. And so I'm trying to do it as a showrunner and trying to just kind of get into it and know that, radio has always done it. And so I'm trying to work with that. And I'll keep updating you guys on how it's working for me. But so far it's awkward and it's weird. But my audience seems to not mind it at all. They rather it than having the same ad over and over again from FreshBooks for the next year. So it looks glorious. The grass is always greener right on the other side. But then you get to the other side and you're like, oh, it actually wasn't that bad over there when I didn't have to put up with these people.
Yeah. And ads can complicate.
Sorry, sponsors, if you're watching this, not you specifically.
Hey, and ads can complicate things too. I think there was an episode of Reply All maybe where they talked about this. But so for Podcast on the Brink, one of the other IU shows that I do, we decided to, Alex, the guy who runs that site, did a little deal with DraftKings. and they were basically doing a sponsorship where for every person that signed up from the podcast, he was getting a little cut of it. And so they sent us over this ad copy to read, and so I did it. And you're right, reading ad copy is, I don't know, it's just like it was terrible. And so for the next episode, I was like, Alex, I've played DraftKings. Just let me talk for 60 seconds about this and like just kind of relate with people about why it's fun and why they should try it out. And so I did. Well, then like 3 days later, this big scandal breaks. I don't know if you heard about this, where this DraftKings employee was like, might have used insider information to go play at FanDuel and won like $350,000. And so the whole daily fantasy sports industry is like coming under attack, and these companies are seeming shady. And now Alex and I are sitting there. It's like we've just been recommending this company to the audience for the last 3 weeks. And now they've gone and done this. And we're like, so what do you want to do? Do you want to just stop the ads? Should we run them this week? He's like, no, let's not do it. Because I was going to tell him I can't do an ad read for this company anymore because I just pulled my money out because I don't trust them. I can't do this. But yet now we've got these past episodes and we haven't gone back and edited the ad reads out, but maybe we will. But that's, there can be, when you do that, and look, the money that you can get from it, from sponsorships and all that stuff, sometimes the practicalities of what we're doing necessitate that we do this. And like you said, you can pay for VAs, you can pay for expenses. And if you get a big show, maybe you can make real money with it. Just know your show is no longer fully yours. I mean, you're giving a little piece of it away, and something like this could happen. I mean, luckily for us, it happened after a couple weeks and there wasn't a contract because it's an affiliate type thing. But man, if we had been locked into like a 3-month contract with them, I don't even know how that would have worked, because I wasn't going to do any more reads for them, because I'm not going to recommend anything to my audience that I don't believe in. So, you are trusting another company.
Right. But I guess that's the difference when it's a sponsorship. When it's an affiliate deal, you haven't made the deal with the company personally, so you can't say. I've heard of people trying to say like, oh, and I'm sponsored by AWeber. It's like, you're not. You have an affiliate relationship, which millions of people do, and that's so it's wrong. But when you have a sponsorship, it's very clearly stated in my contract that I don't recommend anything. I want to thank my sponsor. Here's what they do. But it's not with Facebook, because I had like a partnership, because I didn't have a big audience. And so then I did recommend it and I used it. But even now, if I use a product, I don't recommend it. It's literally a sponsorship deal. This is the sponsor of the show. They're paying for the editing. They're paying for the marketing. They're paying for that of this episode. Because then if something goes wrong, otherwise it's like, well, John, how could you possibly recommend 2 different things per episode 3 times a week? Like, come on. It's going to get just false and wrong, and I don't think they nearly pay me enough to personally recommend something. They just pay me enough to read it, and it's still in my voice, and it's still nothing that I'm morally opposed to and that kind of stuff. Like, I can, with mid-roll, I can say no to anything I want, especially morally or business-wise. It can't conflict with it, all those kinds of things. So it's different, but if you're doing it and you're like, yeah, DraftKings, I use it all the time, these guys are awesome and great, and then it's like, oh,
see, I struggle with that, though, because I get that distinction between like sponsor and recommendation. I just, like, when it comes to my show and my audience, I can't separate the two. Like, if you're sponsoring the show, I'm tacitly recommending them, and to me, there's no real difference.
I'm trying to turn into a media owner and a showrunner in the biggest sense. That's why I'm struggling with it, though, because I feel like you. But I know to go to that next level that I have to figure this out, and I have to be like, no, my content is media. The media can get bumpered by ads, and the better I produce my media, the bigger my audience, the more money I can now dictate for those things. Every TV show, everything, they can't make it without the ads. Right? That's what TV exists, to move ads. And all your favorite shows. That's just how it is. That's why product placement in all your movies, because we need that money to make better content, to make better art. That's just how it is, right? That's why we take sponsors for everything. But it's a hard thing, man. And I'm dealing with that.
Eternal struggle. I mean,
that's why I'm trying to separate. It's like, well, if I'm not endorsing this, this is a sponsor. This is to pay to make my stuff better. This is to pay to get it out to more people. And I think that it's valuable then to a bigger audience, and it's valuable to me at the same time, plus to my sponsor. That's the hard part, right? It's not just a side project for me. It's literally, this is the media I'm trying to build.
It's also why indirect profitability is the holy grail for running a show. Because now, you're doing, it's not like with Rainmaker FM, we don't have to worry about the Rainmaker platform like doing something to embarrass us, because the Rainmaker platform does something, it's the whole company. You know what I mean? Like, it's I don't know. That's why, again, I'll go back to really stressing focus on that indirect profitability, because if you're sponsored by your own products, if you're advertising your own products and it's all together, you never are renting your connection with your audience out to somebody else. And I say this all while we're considering putting ads on Rainmaker FM. So, I mean, there are realities here, and it's every situation is a little bit different. And what I'm saying right now is probably a little bit pie in the sky and unrealistic for some people. And it may be something I have to get over. And it's, understand though that this is coming, and it's probably never too soon to start thinking about it and, planning for how you're going to address it. It's hard. I really struggle with these questions because you've got, you create this great connection with an audience because it's just you. And it's, that's what makes a podcast so great. And then to grow it, you've got to let someone else in, and you've got to kind of rent out your space. And I think you got to really tread carefully with how you do that and keeping the connection with your audience.
The audience does not care in that way. Shockingly enough, man, I've never heard one thing except for when I was doing FreshBooks over and over and over again. The only complaints. I do the craziest ads now that to me don't make any sense. People are my downloads keep going up, and people email me about all their usual things, but never just like, John, stop reading those ads. It's never that.
That's because you've done a good job. That's what I'm saying, though. I don't know. Yeah, but you've connected well. Your audience wants you to succeed. Like they see that this is part of the evolution. Like I think you've done a really good job. I think that's to your credit. I think some people struggle with that. And I think some people start to take their audience for granted, and they look at their audience as something to be monetized rather than something to serve. And you can get in trouble with that when you start thinking differently. So again, it's that balance. Like, because as I told Roman, you start thinking about it from the beginning. I just think you've always got to be careful and remember why the audience is there, and don't just think, well, they're always going to be there and I'm just going to sell sponsors and all this. Like, and I think you've done a really good job of that. And that's why you can do that and sell sponsorships. And, you're going to have a book, and people are going to get it because your audience is connected to you. So just don't. And that's what I mean. Like, I really think, like, if we had looked at that situation on Podcast on the Brink and said, yeah, but it's kind of nice getting those 5 signups. Let's just do the read anyway. I'm sure they'll figure it out. Like, that to me would have been a sign that we are no longer serving our audience. We're talking to an audience to serve ourselves. And you're not going to go very far doing that. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, they're really good thoughts. And it's such a tough thing. And so I'm glad we got to cover the pluses and the negatives and that doing them, and why it still is. It's not like all roses. Trust me. It's hard, but it's all part of becoming a showrunner. It really is. It
is. Okay. So these are the last 2 questions. We may not have time to get to all of these. And I talked with Fred about this in the Facebook group. So we'll go to Mary's real quick. And I can follow up with Fred after this. But Mary asks, curious about the events that host a number of presenters. Often presenters encourage the audience to enter the speaker's name on the registration for a discount. I assume this is related to an affiliate program. Do the presenters get paid through a set fee, or a set fee with a bonus for each registration with their name on it? I think it's a great way to build an audience by engaging the listeners of each presenter. So this is an interesting question, because I think for a lot of people who run shows, ultimately you may want to, or you will get asked to speak places. Now, you've got to get to a pretty good point to where people will pay you to speak at places. And for the most part, the vast majority of your speaking gigs are not going to be paid. The way that most of these relationships work is that, for keynotes, for really big speakers, you'll see them recommend, and they may have some sort of code or an affiliate link. And typically they will, it's going to depend on how much they get up front to speak and what the deal is. But a lot of times they will get a cut then of the tickets that they sell. It just depends on how that relationship is. But the vast majority of the time when you see it, like when I've been tweeting out for this Ascend conference that I'm speaking at in a week, there's a little promo code with my name on it, but I'm not getting a cut of that. Maybe I need a new agent. Or no, actually I don't. Maybe I need to bring in a bigger audience to presentations, because if they knew that I could sell 150 tickets, they would pay me to go speak. It's it's pretty obvious how that works. But I'm not getting that. But I think it does help them see, okay, this speaker, we got 10 signups from this speaker. Okay, maybe we want this guy coming back next year. This guy, we didn't even get anything with his promo code. So, he better bring a good presentation because he didn't really give us anything on the sales side. So that's something, if you're thinking about growing a speaking career, it's, it's interesting to know that that's how it works. But typically, that's how it works.
Yeah, Mary, I would say that if the presenter is getting paid, that it will probably say somewhere at the bottom of that site because of whatever. I was going to say FDA, but I don't know what it is in the States. I can't remember like the Federal Trade Commission, FTC. You have to disclose if you're getting paid based on an affiliate relationship now. So it would say that. But I think that Jared is absolutely right. It's strictly just for tracking so they can see who's promoting. Like, it's probably part of a contract in a lot of ways, is that, well, you got to promote it to your audience, and so they want to make sure by at least getting 1 or 2 signups, and if you are getting 10, then they'll be like, whoa, we really want him back next year. So I really think it's just that. It's just them trying to see where people are coming from.
And let's jump to Fred's question real quick. So he says, how do you set up and use custom links to track podcast promotion via email, various social media, etc.? So one way to do this for people using the Rainmaker platform is you can actually go into the redirect links function and you can create a redirect link. So for example, if I want to promote the Primality Facebook group, I created a link, primality.com/Facebook. It redirects to the Facebook page, but I can go back into my redirect links data and see how many people have clicked on that. Another way that I use these is I was doing I was just doing some testing on Periscope with Rainmaker FM, and I would summarize an episode on Rainmaker FM, and I called them scope tips. And so I created redirect URLs, rainmaker.fm/scope tip 1 and scope tip 2 and scope tip 3. And over the course of a week, I was able to see which one of those was clicked on the most. And so you could take those links and you could do, like, let's say that you were going to promote this Facebook page and you want to see how many people click on it from different places, primality.com/Facebook email, primality.com/Facebook, whatever. And so you could use that for that to put kind of the same link in different places, but just have a different redirect link. And then you can see all of them tracked. That would be one way inside of Rainmaker to do it. I know there are lots of other ways, and there's ways to use parameters with Google Analytics and all of that. I've dabbled in that very little, but not enough to speak intelligently on it. But for those of you using Rainmaker, that redirect link function is a really good way to do that.
Yeah, or if you're just on WordPress, then Pretty Links, which is really similar to the Rainmaker version. And it's funny because actually now, I don't think that redirect version, that portion of Rainmaker existed when I moved over. So they actually built Pretty Links in for me because I was using it so much already. And they were like, we don't know how to do this. So they actually just put Pretty Links into mine for me.
Nice.
But now I've got 2 functions. So now I'm moving everything over from Pretty Links. And there's also just the free one, Bitly, right? bitly.com. You can
that one works.
You can use that for free and it'll change it to a Bitly link. And then you can also, if you have your own domain with nothing being used, so my hte.io is now my Bitly link. So everything I tweet through Twitter, it will shorten it down to an hte.io link for me. So it looks branded, but it's all tracked within Bitly. I can go there and see who clicked on anything anywhere. So either way.
Yeah, and Fred just said, we'll give it a try. Seems like the list will become long. It will. Email support and tell them that in the future you want to see that you want to be able to download that as a CSV, like download that report. And I don't. It may actually be in there. I haven't used it yet to download a report, but that would be ripe for reporting. Would be that, or even just be able to download it as like an Excel file, because then you'd be able to sort it, and it would be much easier to see.
I think you can delete them, right? If you want.
Oh yeah, you can delete them.
So I mean, when they're super old, if it's not something on your site that you're trying to track, if it's like from an old email from 6 months ago, at some point you can probably just get rid of them. Like, I mean, if somebody opens that email now, it's kind of irrelevant. So you can clean that up yourself and do your own admin work.
Yeah, and Chris is right. It will break the link is the only problem.
Of course. But so that's why you only break a link for really old. Don't do it obviously from something from last week.
Yes.
Our attention spans are still long enough that we still might be able to respond to something from a week ago.
So it is an hour. I want to alert people to the screen. It is currently 552 to 551. Johnny, I want to give you the floor here at the end.
552, look at that.
Because I want to give you the opportunity to say something so profound that you just get mad props to lead us out here.
Oh, boy. Yeah, what's
Humility for the win. Maybe saying nothing is the best way to go. See, this kind of makes it fun. It's cheesy, but there's like this fun, oh, high five. Can we high five each other? Maybe I need to go
wrong way. You're the wrong way?
No, you're the wrong way.
Really?
There we go. Yeah.
Oh, seriously? Oh, because the way you are. No, it's for me.
Oh, we're switched.
And I kept pointing over at your number, so I'm pointing on the wrong side for you. Oh, because our screens are switched. Well, that's bizarre.
Now we know. So hey, those of you who are still here, give us the thumbs up or a thumbs down on Blab here for these. Because again, I mean, I will say, the one downside of doing these on Blab is these are supposed to be private hangouts.
I only had to kick out one person.
Oh,
it's pretty good. I kicked out one person during it. Yeah, because he was saying asinine things. He said like 3 different things. And then finally I just blocked him. I figured out how. He's like, oh, and I can kick him out and block him.
Nice. Cool. And the other thing that we could do too, which is kind of nice with this, is you can actually open up a seat and then someone could come grab this seat and we could pull them in and they could actually ask their question live too. So there's some there's kind of some fun different things that we can do with this.
I agree. I really like this.
Yeah. So let's think about it. Because we'd have to weigh it again. People can trickle in here, but I kind of think it's, I just think the interactivity that we've gotten on this one is so much better.
Yeah. And I think even if people can trickle in, for the most part, we're only answering questions from the group. Right. Except for unless somebody asks a question here and it's a good question, then it probably benefits everyone anyways. Mm-hmm. All these conversations get to extend further into the private Facebook group. So we still get the benefit ourselves. But I think it's good to have just extra people coming in and going sometimes. I saw a couple of friends. They must have came off Twitter, came by. I was like, that's kind of cool. So
yeah. Yeah, and can you archive these? Yes, these actually stay in your account, but what's even better is they'll email you as soon as the video is ready, and you can download the video or the audio, and there's a button that pops up, and you can upload it directly to YouTube, which is really nice. And so we will do that. We will upload this to our Showrunner YouTube account, so if you're subscribed there, you can do it. And then you can't embed the Blab video, but by uploading it to YouTube, now I can go back and embed it on the lesson page, so it'll live on the lesson page. We'll get the audio, do it as an MP3. So for that whole thing, doing the one recording and being able to put it out in 3 or 4 different places, it's really, really useful. So, all right, I'm going to stop the recording, but we'll still be live. So thank you all for listening to this episode of
you won props on this one.